First, I'd like to quickly go over some of the things I liked about the game. The most immediately obvious nice thing is the graphics. To go with the fancy lighting, snow, dust and other stuff gets stuck to your character, which is really pretty. You'll leave footprints or wheel marks on appropriate surfaces, and objects will break apart nicely when damaged. While neither of these features are completely new for a LEGO game, they have never looked as good as they do here. Also, the franchise's newish open world character collecting formula is as engaging as it has always been, in that it's perfectly fine as long as you're watching or listening to something else while you're doing it. The sense of progression in seeing less characters blacked out is nice, and with the amount to unlock, I'll probably be going back to the game on and off for quite a bit of time. I liked some of the jokes too. A lot of the jokes I liked were the ones based around daft puns and slapstick. I liked when Finn kept being hit by stuff in The Force Awakens, and I liked the drill pun in Star Wars.
Maybe it's another drill.
However, most of the jokes I liked were the ones which would have worked in the old formula of games, which made funny references to the films and didn't use voice acting. I liked the bit where Chewbacca doesn't get his medal at the end of Star Wars, and I really liked how the suns moved in the last shot of The Rise of Skywalker. However, many of the reference jokes seemed more like they wanted to do something funny at that point, but didn't know what to do, so just put the first recognisable thing they could think of, whether or not it was relevant to the scene or the characters involved. The joke that comes to mind with this is when Qui-Gon Jinn saves Jar Jar Binks and bangs his head to the tune of the Imperial March. People tend to like this joke for some reason, but it's annoyed me more than I can reasonably justify. The Imperial March has nothing to do with the situation happening and nothing to do with Qui-Gon, Jar Jar or the droid army. It's just them putting something recognisable into the scene and hoping really hard that you don't notice that it's not relevant in the slightest. Even when the jokes aren't referencing something, they'll often just default to having the characters do something unexpected, like dance or something else unexpected. I understand that this game had to try to appeal to a very wide audience, ranging from literal toddlers to losers my age who still play LEGO games, and I also said that I liked some of the slapstick stuff, but it still feels a bit lazy. I think that one of the main reasons for why the LEGO games seemed to be funnier before they added voice acting was the fact that it forced the simplification of iconic scenes, and not simply because the noise the characters made was funny. If everyone knows the story and what's supposed to be happening, small comedic changes can be endearing, like making Episode 1's Obi-Wan incompetent deliberately, having Leia throw the message into R2-D2, and having Luke cut C-3PO's head off. Voice acting adds a new layer and gives more opportunities for jokes where it might have been tricky or impossible to include them before.
They were the droids we were looking for!
While this might sound good, it seems like it makes the writers frightened of having any moment without a joke. As an example from the scene where Yoda dies, I'd rather have nothing instead of them try to do a memey incest joke after they've already taken the incest parts out of the game to make it more palatable.
Leia's my sister?
That being said, it was nice of them to include the mumble mode option. No, it didn't change the pacing or length or complexity of cutscenes, and yes, the game did force you to have subtitles, but it was a nice gesture anyway. Or was it? I know that the extra work needed for adding the mumble mode isn't normally what is talked about when it comes to the issue of the crunch associated with this game and the company behind it, and I acknowledge that I don't know anything about the way they added the new lines, so this segue might be complete bollocks. However, it is pretty interesting and bad to read the Polygon article about how TT Games relied on and even planned in crunch time where developers were overworked. I don't want to talk about this for very long as it's not very fun to talk about, and I'm guessing it won't be fun to edit around either. There's also not really any room for interpretation, so no way to even try to make it more interesting than just reading the article for yourself. But I thought I should at least bring it up. It's definitely worth reading the article though right now if you haven't already. However, it shouldn't surprise you that for a game with such a nice detailed open world, it shouldn't have been made using the same strategy as back when the company was making literal pulp, even when that pulp accidentally became a beloved game. Something that would have required a lot of work and arguably wouldn't have been worth the effort, even if made in a healthy work environment, is some of the not very well thought through additions they made to the gameplay. In the old games, they didn't have any depth to the combat. When it came to fighting, you mostly just spammed the attack button and your character would punch, shoot, or hit with some sort of stick using very forgiving auto-aim. If you had a lightsaber, you could deflect lasers, and if you didn't, you could dodge lasers. There wasn't much more depth than that. Though you'd rarely have to go and do something like get another helmet or replay a part of the level again when you died. Most of the time you'd just lose some studs which you could then pick up again. It did add slightly more depth over the years, but it all felt pretty much the same. To be clear, I'm not calling this a positive thing or a negative thing. As said before, the target audience included toddlers, so it makes sense for them to not want the game to be punishing or too difficult. With the new game, they've added melee combos, cover, typical third-person shooter crosshairs, and specific and detailed ways to dodge. However, despite all this new depth, they didn't change the lack of consequences for when it comes to dying. Well, apart from making it easier to get the stud magnet thing, completely removing all consequences for most of the times you die. I get that this could be seen as a good thing. It gives the player more opportunities if they want to feel like they're playing the game well while still making it accessible. However, there's no real incentive for using many of these new mechanics. It's always easier, quicker, and for me at least more fun to just continuously shoot or throw lightsabers at the baddies while running around in circles, without worrying too much about being hit by anything. I'm not saying that they should have added checkpoints or anything like that, I just think that it would have been nice if there was a real consequence for dying to make me want to avoid dying. What if it used something like in Far Cry 5 where your comrades can come and bring you back from the dead, though in this case it would be you or a split-screen ally playing as the other character. When that fails, or if you choose to skip the countdown, maybe you lose some of the collected studs. I know that this might have made the game more of a hassle to play and would probably need more thought and planning than what I just put into it to make it actually work in an appealing way, but this would have at least incentivized trying not to die. Why not include different options in the settings and let people decide how they wanted to play? The latest Crash Bandicoot game has different options for how lives work, and they could have done something similar to that. Do you want the classic respawning, or do you want the slightly less forgiving respawning? Making the game trickier might have also incentivized more interesting level design. Again, I'm not blaming anyone for anything. I'm sure the level designers probably had a shite time level designing, and I don't want to be a dickhead. Also, I probably mean the same for the writers, though I've got no idea how writing for a game works. What I'm trying to say is that it's not helping anyone to pretend that it was better than it was, and it would have probably been good if everyone had been given a more appropriate amount of time. In too many of the encounters, the best solution was to stand in one spot and shoot people as they came through a door, or two doors if you're lucky. Sometimes the levels will pretend to be interesting as they'll give you a choice of what you want to build to get past a specific obstacle. At best, you'll unlock one of two corridors, which then rejoin after a few meters. At worst, it's all just change a model and animation in a QuickTime event. In the 2016 Doom game, you'll sometimes get a thing which allows you to upgrade one of your stats. What you choose to upgrade can sometimes be a difficult choice. Each choice would be useful, but you have to think what you would find the most useful. I'm not saying that they should have made a LEGO game tricky enough for you to have to consider things like this, but it would have been nice if different options for what to build accommodated different playstyles. If adding different gameplay modes, better level design, or interesting build options sounds like it would have been too much to do in the short time given, something they could have scrapped to give more time could have been some of the terminal puzzles. You go up to them and do a small and uninteresting puzzle. You can tell that they knew that these puzzles weren't interesting because you can unlock the ability to bypass all of them, unless you want to earn bonus studs. Maybe if you think you should include such a skill, the puzzles were never interesting enough in the first place. In the old games, there was nothing wrong with just making sure you were playing as the right type of character for that terminal and just having it open. I know that this isn't a new thing. In the LEGO Indiana Jones games, you'd sometimes have to copy a sequence, much like in one of the terminals in this game. However, it's frustrating to see that they were self-aware enough to notice that this would be something that someone might want to skip and still not be self-aware enough to notice that it's not interesting enough to be included in the first place. Another gameplay thing I found disappointing was the traversal. There wasn't really a more interesting way to get about other than just running. I get that some of the characters can fly or glide for a small amount of time, and I get that there are some vehicles you can go on in some of the maps, but it would have been nicer if they'd done something more interesting. I get that each individual map in the game is relatively small compared to what they'd previously had for their open worlds, but it would have been nice to have more stuff to do when getting around, especially given how much time you'll spend walking from place to place throughout the story. I know that it's been said many times before, but I'm going to say it again. A lot of the game, particularly in the prequels, is just travelling to a planet, watching a cutscene, and then going to another planet. This wasn't a problem in the older games when they had a hub like the cantina. In that, you'd just go to the next interesting thing instantly. But because of their insistence on having the game have an open world, with the little missions to do between the proper missions, there's a lot of time spent just walking around. Don't get me wrong, as said before, I really enjoyed doing stuff in the open world. However, I think that the game would have felt more solid without its inclusion. What if they'd kept or gone back to the old format and had a really impressive but separate hub world? What if each film or trilogy had its own hub world, which included some of the key settings, like how the films are separated in LEGO Indiana Jones 2? Even if it would have resulted in the game not including as much stuff technically, I really think that the story doesn't work for the open world they went with. Though there are probably more, I can think of two different types of open worlds when it comes to games with a story. Linear ones, like in Tomb Raider, and open ones, like in Grand Theft Auto. When travelling from place to place in open worlds, the game often keeps you interested by including interesting traversal, such as stealing cars or swinging from webs. In linear open worlds, the game keeps you interested by knowing the exact route you'll take and making that interesting. In open worlds, you'll often go back to the same place multiple times throughout the game. In linear open worlds, you'll often only visit somewhere once. It seems like for this game they tried to have it both ways. When getting between missions, it'll want you to take a specific path. During this, it'll sometimes put small puzzles for you to come across and solve before progressing. However, the world was rarely designed with these moments in mind, as they had to accommodate for the same locations being visited multiple times. There's nothing about the world to keep me interested the 50th time I'm visiting the Jedi Temple in the story. This wouldn't have been as much of a bad thing if they'd made it so different characters move differently for more than a few seconds at most, or if they'd added vehicles to more locations and made those vehicles feel interesting to use. Anyway, pretty good game, maybe get it when it's on sale if you've got a second monitor.